I think at least 10 years, maybe more than that, it always strikes a chord. Where every time you read it in the class with people, you can try it yourself as well, you can hear it hint. There is something about this text that is just so brief, so simple in its language, so ambitious in its kind of its vision, that it really, and it's also, it always sounds so relevant. But yesterday when I was reading it with you, there was this one sentence that really stayed with me. And I don't think I noticed it so much in the past, but that's the beauty of this text, that it really resonates in different ways depending on the environment you read it in. Now that in itself is quite interesting, because this is exactly the sort of tuning in that we are often talk here about in relation of what makes a work of art really tick or stick, you know, that it you tune into it. Like when I showed you zooming in on the Starry Night by Van Gogh, and you see the rhythms, yeah, and how these rhythms might indicate a kind of tune that the image emits or resonates with. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the German word Stimmung. I think we also mentioned it as this. It means to tune an instrument, but it also means to be in a certain mood. You know, and how this mood, how a text like this can really resonate with precisely the environment we're in. So anyway, there was this one sentence that I most of the time, I guess, in the past just skipped over. Not only historical fascism, the fascism of Hitler and Mussolini, which was able to mobilize and use the desire of the masses so effectively. But so I often drew a lot of attention to the fascism in us all, and that seemed to me very important. But this time, what really seemed very profound is this: able to mobilize and use the desire of the masses so effectively. I didn't really notice it before, but now it somehow seemed so relevant. How do you mobilize and use the desire of the masses? And what is the effective way of doing it? Now, I think we saw yesterday that in Hitler's time, in Nazi Germany, the effective way was cinema. That was the most mass, that was the mass medium, the one that everyone went to the cinema. That was before television sets were common. I don't think there was kind of commercial television. But what there was is a film house, and in before every film there would be newsreels screened. So going to the cinema was also taking in some visual reports about politics and fashion, and it would be like a bit like a sort of the 10 o'clock news that we get on television now. That's what the packet films used to produce. Yeah, little short pieces all edited together and screened before the main feature. So that's why Lenin also said that cinema is the most important tool of propaganda, the most important art of the Soviet Republic. Why? Because it reaches everywhere. So, but that was then, you see. The question is, how does this thing mobilize and use the desire of the masses so effectively? How does it work now? Where do you see that? So I think it almost like we are searching for how these mobilizations happen. Now, not all of them have to be some kind of really sinister, I don't think. Because mobilization, you might say, is just about energy. Where the energy goes is a different question. The energy can go to something terrible, something fascist. It also potentially, perhaps, I wouldn't want to completely discount the possibility of going towards something positive, like, I don't know, a greener planet or something like that. So, what does it mean then to mobilize and use the desire of the masses how does it work exactly? So that connects to my mind to what Nietzsche is talking about and what we're reading around the question of biopolitics. So I want to stay with these themes, and I want to deal with a little bit in more detail today, because I know that this stuff is sometimes feeling really, really remote from what you do, and you might be kind of wondering, what the hell why I'm listening to this and what I'm supposed to do with it. But you really have to persevere, and you have to let the main problems and the main concepts sink in, from your kind of conscious mind somewhere a little bit deeper. And once they become more automatic, you will see how a lot of things start to make sense, but it takes time. So I'm telling you that, and it's not easy. So the session today is not going to be easy to follow, and sometimes you drift away, that's absolutely fine. It's also fine to fall asleep. There's no problem with that. But wake up at some point. Wake up and come back. That's as long as you keep doing that, it's going to be very interesting. So this is the question: what does it mean to mobilize and use the design? Now, a couple of things popped to my mind. Was there anything extraordinary that happened yesterday?
Edit big preview.
Say again?
Edit big preview.
What was it?
Edit big. The preview, you say was something that can happen. I said.
Preview of what?
Edit big, the artist.
Okay.
It was the preview in
Where?
White Cube.
Okay, I see.
It was amazing.
Is that what you did last evening?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? Was there something?
Someone paid for a car to be shown.
That's getting warmer. But can someone refine that? Can someone? Okay. So what? Who? Why?
Elon Musk.
Right. Elon Musk. Thank you. What did he do? What happened yesterday? He sent a very big spaceship into space, almost like the biggest ever sent. Exactly, and it's called Falcon Heavy. There are a couple of things interesting about it. First is that it's a private enterprise, and he sent practically the heaviest spaceship ever into space. Not only that, he also managed to recycle 2 of the 3 engines, which are themselves spaceships. Like it's a spaceship is 3 spaceships tied together with something, and that goes in. And then there is a cargo load. So at some point, these 3 spaceships disengage, and he managed to get close and just to land. You can watch it on YouTube. It's just remarkable. Just to land like this, like ballerinas in a field in a designated space. Not like exploding. It's just unbelievable. And that suggests that sort of the possibility of humans becoming transplanetary creatures is becoming a little bit more real, and it probably will happen in your own lifetime. That people will be living somewhere else besides the Earth. What does it mean to biopolitics? Well, if you are living in a colony on Mars, are you the same person? What do you think? Do you think human society will be the same, just in a different planet? Or will it be completely different? Well, one of the questions we're trying to... This is one of the things we are here for, to find out answers to questions like this, because no one else really cares, For Musk and for everyone else who is dealing with, rocket science, it's about getting there. But who is actually asking what will happen to us once we get there? Will we have the same dreams? Will we have the same, ways of falling in love? How will this affect? So I think the people who can start asking these questions are precisely artists. Where else there is an interest in how, for instance, space travel alters our consciousness, whether we are in the spaceship or not, because, we are already on the spaceship. This one, yeah. So how our thinking is changed, and how our ways of dreaming, making art, making love, being together, being alone, how all these behaviors are affected by something like that. Now, and too topical, And that's why I said this mobilization and use of desire. The most interesting part, and that was Linda was mentioning, is that this spaceship that now went into space probably will be, they wanted to crash onto Mars, but the chances are not very, very high that it will hit Mars. But it might, because so far it went very well, the whole project. The spaceship carries a Tesla Roadster car, because Elon Musk is also making this electric car, electric sports car, with a dummy inside the car, and David Bowie is playing in the speakers, and then you can find it online. There are pictures of this sports car with the Earth in the background, and it's not a montage, but really this thing is now flying through space and will probably fly for billions of years with David Bowie playing, with this dummy sitting in a Tesla Roadster, and the iPad on the display, or the kind of the display says, "Don't panic," and it's all there. You can see it. So, and that just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, in the windowsill, he has a model of the car with the dummy, like a small one.
Yeah.
So that means it's like makeup. So it's like the whole thing is a joke.
The whole thing is a joke. The whole thing is an art object. The whole thing also is incredible scientific achievement, you know, and it kind of operates on many levels. But if you talk about mobilizing the desire of the masses, I think it does make sense to put a dummy with David Bowie in an electric car and send it into space. You know, why? Is it self-promotion? Yes, but it's all these things. But it's also because it's a way of mobilizing desire. It's a way of making us dream in a particular way. Yeah, and we will see how effective it is. But I think something is really changed. Something changed over the last 24 hours in our relationship with space, because suddenly the space became much closer to our living rooms, or to our dreams, or to our memories. Yeah, because there is a part of us that is now will be traveling for a very long time in the cosmos. So these are kind of interesting things.
Interesting to see how long, because with the Apollo missions, the interest dropped off really rapidly. Yeah. Like the first one, Apollo 11, obviously half the world watching on TV. And then the next one, the audience really fell off rapidly. And then the following one was when they had that disaster and there was a big drama getting back to Earth and the interest peaked again. Yeah. And after that, it kind of completely flatlined. That's why they didn't even launch the last 3 Saturn V's, because there was no sort of reason to do it. Once they started playing golf on the moon, it kind of was a bit like, maybe it's just only sending a car.
So what do you think about it? What do you think about this Falcon Heavy? Do you think it is also will also die off, the excitement?
I don't know. It'd be interesting for us to see. I think it's more to do with the fact that it's a private thing rather than government. It's almost like a kind of sort of victory for private capital over like a communal effort, which it was with the Apollo. It's almost like corporations have kind of filled in where governments used to do. So it's like kind of
it reminds me of
success.
Yes, well, but there is that, of course, and but also how he allegedly made it all with much smaller budgets than NASA.
Yeah,
much more efficient somehow. So he is a very interesting character as well, I think. You know, a kind of Leonardo of our times. I don't know, Leonardo and Alexander in one person. So this is kind of interesting, and at the same time, there are also other ways to pull the strings of desire, and I think that something like that is perhaps happening and can explain the Trump thing, because through this sentence here, mobilize and use the desire of the masses so effectively. You can see how then Trump emerges as someone who figured out a way to manipulate the desires of, I don't know, 42 million people or whoever are receiving his tweets via the Twitter feed. So the tweets he descends every day in bursts, in kind of volleys, and it's important. It's like it's almost like a transmission from outer space, you know, and then nothing for a few hours, and then and it's not in English. They look as if they are in English, but it's a trick. It's code. It's a code that manipulates desire. It's code that manipulates feelings of insecurity, of anger, of entitlement. We don't understand it. We read it as words, but it's not words. It is a mere code. And that's how desire is pulled, manipulated today, in the same way that when you look at Leni Riefenstahl, I hope it was clear, but I thought it's just so important to understand it. In Leni Riefenstahl's film, Triumph of the Will, the message is not in the speeches. By the time the speeches come and people go on stage one after the hour, another, Himmler and everyone is saying, Hitler, you are our leader, we are all as one person stand behind you. All of that was already said in the language of the film, cinematically, without a single word being spoken. Yeah. So again, you see, this is exactly like what I said about Twitter. It appears as if it is a story about, let's say, a conference of the Nazi Party, but the code is beneath it. You don't need to see the code. You need to really start understanding how the how the technique of the film works, how the technique of editing and of juxtaposing and of combining visuals and sound works. Did you see this amazing moment when the cook pours the soup, yeah, and the music flows exactly with the soup, yeah, and how all these messages, as you know, we will always look after you, and we will rub each other's back, and we catch you when you fall, and most importantly, one for all and all for one. How all of that is fully established through the language of cinema, not through any linguistic methods. And Twitter, I want to suggest, operates in a similar way. So you understand what we are dealing with here. We are dealing with technology that does what? Technology that manipulates desire. Now what does Guattari call that? They call it desiring machines. Yeah, so you see now why Foucault puts that in the introduction, in the preface to Anti-Oedipus. That's where the notion of desiring machines is established and developed. So the desiring machine is not in itself good or bad, yeah? But it makes you understand that desire is always a question of a process. Desire is always mechanistically produced and managed and controlled. And this, what you might say, what you are doing here as practitioners, as artists, or I don't know if the word artist has any currency anymore, but as people who practice, I think has something to do with figuring out the various mechanisms that create or distribute or divert desire. That, I think, what an art object is. Yeah, is it the same with fashion? What do you think? Yeah, I think so. I think fashion is very much about, fashion is not so much about making, say, jackets or skirts. It's more about taking anything, a concept, an object, a drink, and making it fashionable. How do you make something X fashionable? Well, you have to make people desire it. That's the only way, huh?
That was Elon Musk. I think something he did more interesting was like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
With flamethrower.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to raise money for his boring company. He's building a tunnel. Yeah. And he took an airsoft rifle and put one of these, you know these, what do you call them? They just shoot fire.
Flamethrower.
They're like what plumbers use. He attached one to a gun and just called it a flamethrower, and he put this 5-second GIF on Twitter of him running around the office shooting fire, and then in 3 days he sold $10 million worth of them, 500. And I think that was, he really tapped into a desire.
That's very interesting, yeah, because that's again something that you see how Twitter operates. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm following him on Instagram, which is a really good channel, no? To see how propaganda operates through images.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how he represents himself in a kind of Peter Pan, like someone, a kind of child, no?
Yeah, yeah.
You really want to grow up or something like that. It's interesting.
Yes. But also, I mean, what is important is to understand what we are talking about here can engage different forms of politics. So FEB is also has very interesting use of Instagram, for instance. And do you know the lead gun? Or something like that. Yeah? So FEB, the Chinese political artist, puts a picture of him on Twitter, I don't know which one is that, holding his leg like this, like a gun, yeah? And we put it, I think, on his Instagram account or something like that. And thousands of people around the world do the same gesture. So I don't know what became of it, but you can see how something like a movement can also originate from gestures like this. Now, how that exactly works? Is it like a symbol? Is it a hieroglyph? Is it a protest? What is it exactly about? It's not entirely clear, but it touches upon something in a kind of strange way, yeah? Or maybe, do you have a better way to explain it?
Isn't it sort of like joining in with the code? You are part of the group, so it's making you part of the group. It's like that ice bucket challenge or something like that. You become part of that society.
It is like the ice bucket challenge, but the difference is that ice bucket challenge didn't have any politics behind it. But this seems to me that it has politics behind it. Or you don't think so?
I think it all depends if you're capital P politics or a small p politics.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it is just a stupid gesture, but I thought, for me it felt like he says here something about the gun culture. And I think the image appeared after some of the shootings, the big shootings. I don't remember what it was, but it seemed that it does talk about violence in the way that it say the ice bucket. Maybe ice bucket also talks about violence, but the organizer of it, that's not what they cared about.
No, that was just another example.
No, I know, but I think, so it maybe an internet fad is an interesting thing to look at, and can you start your own? Can you look at this, at let's say the internet fad, as something to explore, as one way to perhaps address how desire is being mobilized and used. But the point I wanted to make is that it's not when we read anti-Oedipus, when we also read Nietzsche that we turn to in a minute, we need to all the time remember that we need to constantly translate it into our own environment for things to make sense. So finally, as a link to that, to the between Foucault and Nietzsche, I want to take one example to show you what we might mean by biopolitics. I mean, already you can see that how to mobilize and to use the desire is a form of biopolitics. Yeah, desire is, what is desire? Is the repressed sexual energy that has no way to come out. Why? Because we have to behave in a respectable way. So once someone learns how to tap into this energy inside us and direct it towards something that can be anything that disturbs or is said to disturb the community, the sense of wholeness, then some interesting things start to happen. So as a link between that and Nietzsche, I wanted to think about the Coca-Cola. Okay, this image I have in mind. So I was just thinking about it today on the way here, that how we can look at something like that in a different way. How we can use Foucault and Nietzsche to sort of turn this can around. So the usual narrative, the usual way of thinking about it would be, well, it clearly is a beverage that so many people love that it even puts love in big Coca-Cola letters on massive billboards. Yeah? And it is true, loads and loads of people love Coca-Cola, even though we know it's not good for us. You know, there will be certain times during the week when this is exactly the thing you need. Okay, so everyone loves it, that's why it's so popular, right? That is the narrative is that they hit on the formula that is so delicious. Everyone loves it, that it's irresistible, even though we know it's bad for us, we still drink it, and it's just because it's so tasty. And so really tasty that everyone in the world loves it and likes it. And it's just a victory of invention, something that everyone loves. That is the usual story behind Coca-Cola, yeah? It is the most popular beverage in the world, probably also one of the objects that are most often consumed. Yeah, something like that. But how can we look at it not from not from this narrative of you know, progress and invention and, you know, hard work is being rewarded, but or sort of the best product is the most popular, this kind of narrative. How can we turn it around through, let's say, what we have been reading? So one way to think about it is that the reason this kind of this drink is so popular is not because it is the most delicious, it's because it is the most affordable. And affordable to whom? Affordable to someone who has a basic wage. Affordable to someone who has a basic job. Yeah? Who is on a minimal wage, who works in a factory if you are in a production country, or who is on the minimum wage if you are in a Western country or something like that. If you are homeless, unemployed, you are not a customer of this particular thing. But if you have a basic wage, this is something you can afford. Why you can afford it? Because it's made of one of the cheapest materials you can buy, which is sugar. Sugar is one of the cheapest. The two cheapest products are the most popular ones, sugar and cotton. They are the cheapest ones to manufacture. But I just want to talk about that. So the kind of Coke, the kind of the biopolitical reading, we will say, is popular not because it is the most delicious. It's popular because it is the cheapest and therefore affordable to most people. Affordable in particular to people who make sugar large part of their diet. And why people make sugar large part of their diet? Because it is cheap. Yes, so people don't eat a lot of sugar because, you know, they are stupid. They eat it because it is a cheap way to get the necessary fuel. Yeah. So when Coca-Cola puts love on their billboards, what it really means is not that everyone loves Coca-Cola, but is that what people really love is to be alive, and sugar is a cheap way to achieve that. Yeah. So yes, Coca-Cola means love, but not because it's the flavor that we love. It's the possibility of not dying. Right? So you see how looking at this object from the perspective of the body changes the picture of the. Does it make sense? You seem very quiet.
Isn't it the same with magnet?
It's the same with everything. It's the same with everything. Yeah. That was just one thing I was thinking today, but on the way here there were some Coca-Cola signs, so it made me think how it is so ubiquitous. Yes, and I also wanted to ask, how many of you didn't have Coca-Cola in your childhood?
Didn't have.
Didn't
I didn't
have.
have, no.
What do you mean, like, it didn't exist? Or
Didn't, well, was not sort of, not available. So how you did have it as a kind of thing in your childhood? Not that many.
A long time, I mean, not.
No.
But there were other soft drinks, fizzy drinks. Coca-Cola.
Soft drinks.
Yes. So the cheapness argument, I'm not sure. I think it's more that kind of buying a slice of American life.
What did
that caused that.
Come back with us. Say it again.
Well, I'm not sure that the argument about it being cheap.
Yeah.
It's no cheaper than any other.
No,
it's a premium brand among.
Exactly the same argument applies to the other drinks as well.
But you're right, if you're...
I think it's aspirational
Yeah.
in a cultural sense, because it's in America, it's like, you know, apple pie, it's like an American, you know, to a lot of the world, it's like an aspirational brand, isn't it?
I agree. You're right, of course. But exactly the same analysis would apply as well. Now, of course, all the aspirational elements and the marketing and the advertising, it all plays a part. What I said is that if you begin not from ideas but from the body, you come to a different way of looking at this object. And its popularity then is not because it is universally tasty, and also not because it is sort of universally appealing to have an American lifestyle. Is it really that appealing anymore? But it is because it is cheap. Now, of course, there are other cheap products. I'm not saying that this is the only one, but it still seems as a cheap way to get energy, and it is that is completely standardized. Yes.
Sorry, I have like a question about the designer, about like Coca-Cola, that kind of cheap product.
Yeah.
Because I remember like Andy Warhol said like in Coca-Cola actually is like really good production. Because like Elizabeth Taylor can have that, and you can have that as well. Like the Queen Elizabeth can have that as well. But like I think like if say we make something like fashion, but we have to make people design that. I mean, like from my understanding, I think like designer probably means in some part like hard to achieve.
Yeah.
But Coca-Cola is something you can have that. It's really cheap. Everyone can have that. Like how do you describe like designer and that kind of thing? Like you can really easily get that in any shop.
I think it's interesting what you're asking. And I think the question of desire in relation to something like Coca-Cola is also interesting, because the whole point of Coca-Cola is that you can have, you know, $1 million in your pocket, and you can still only buy this. There's no like rich version. There's no like, you know, black diamond version of Coca-Cola. Everyone can only buy this one can. And I think that it's also almost the same with the iPhone. You know, even though the iPhone is a much more expensive product, and there are, let's say, 3 or 4 versions, but it's almost as if there is only one. And it's almost as if, no matter, you know, whether you are Elon Musk or, let's say, a student, you're going to have the same iPhone.
I think that model is changing with the iPhone 10.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more expensive, and it's becoming...
It's true, yeah. So it's not 100%. I'm just showing you how the desirability can sometimes be about everyone. About there is just one thing. Yes. Yes.
So I think like I know there is a promoting way in fashion. It's called hunger promoting. So basically, like all the really lyrics kind of brand, like LV or you know, like Vitamin right now, it's really hip, like young kind of fashion brand. They always use the promoting like hunger. Means like I provide less production when you design them. So like make the price really high and make everybody buy that. And then Coca-Cola, definitely, and Apple, the iPhone, changing our way to design things. Means like everyone can have that, everyone have the same, but I'm still designing that. I think that kind of switch is really interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, just like right now on Instagram, we can just posting everything and you can follow people, but you know, like the following back doesn't really necessary. But before, people think, oh, I follow you, I want you to follow me back. So that kind of like the feedback loop. But today, I think like I can give in more, but I'm not really kind of excited to receive that more. That's really kind of interesting.
I think what I've noticed in relation to this is that the model seems to be you standardize and then you diversify and create niches that are more desirable.
Mm-hmm.
So you get people hooked on something standard and familiarize them to the concept. So like with drinks, for example, now when I think about drinks that are desirable, I wouldn't think of Coke. I think of all the hipster brands like these niche beers and soft drinks and kind of coffees that are like everyone's chasing down in different parts of London and trying to find the most exclusive and kind of different flavor. So I think nowadays this kind of scarcity is becoming the model of how we utilize desire by producing rarity but from a standardized place. So I don't know what that means for art, to be honest. I think the hipsters are much better at doing the kind of art design than artists, really.
But I think here we are not talking anymore about a phone or a drink. I think we are talking about a brand.
Yeah.
Because when you are drinking Coca-Cola, you are not drinking a drink, you are drinking a brand. And that makes you feel like I'm much better, you know, because I am having Coca-Cola or because I am having an iPhone or something like that. Because what you are desiring there is be someone who they say you are when you buy that brand, you know. So it's like the desire of being someone that they represent in their advertisement or something like that. It's a style of living, something like that. And because you can literally buy, instead of buying Coca-Cola, you can buy a cup of tea.
But so you're right, you can buy a cup of tea. What is the difference between a cup of tea and a can of Coke? So what I'm trying to suggest is that the difference is that the can of Coke is a desiring machine.
Yeah.
And the cup of tea, well, I think, Anna, you might disagree. You might say that, and I think that you will make a good point. You will say, no, there is a lot of desire in tea. Yeah. So
you can also buy like Asda's own brand of Coke if you want it.
You can.
Like 15 pence a can.
Yeah.
So Coca-Cola is a kind of premium brand in the Coke market, isn't it? In the cola market. I think it's about.
All I was I understand your objection. I think that's absolutely valid. What I was trying to put on the table is that how to start looking at anything, at the object or at the entity or anything, not from the point of concepts or ideas, but from the perspective of what is it made from, what is its materiality. So then what is it made from is sugar, the cheapest produce there is. That's why also the profit margin on the can of Coke is astronomical. Yeah, because the difference between the price at the point of sale and how much it costs to manufacture is enormous. And for that reason, the price also can be such that people on the basic living wage can afford it as perhaps the first step into luxury. Because it is true, if you really don't have a spare penny in your pocket, you will not buy Coca-Cola, you will buy, a roll of bread. But once you have a job, and that means that your survival is, let's say, a shade less precarious, Coca-Cola appears as the first thing you can desire. Yeah, that's what I think the love really means. The love doesn't mean, well, what Coca-Cola wants to mean is that out of all the available flavors in the world, the one we love the most is Coca-Cola. And that's what we most of the time believe. But if you look at it from the perspective of production, that the love refers not so much to the taste of the product, but that it's just that people are clinging to life in a sort of stupid and meaningless fashion, you know. And in order to stay alive, they need to eat something. So they eat something that provides maximum calories for minimum outlay, and that just happens to be this. Does it make sense? Yeah? And I'm not suggesting that this really, you know, this is how it is. I'm saying that's how a reading of this object from the perspective of its materiality could work out. I'm not saying that it's, that, you know, that it explains everything and that you don't need any other theories or ways of thinking. But this is one that that begins from the object itself and from the bodies that are connected to it. Yeah, so it could be, you know, you can do with it what you like, but this is how I wanted to bridge to Nietzsche, because last time we stopped at the middle of section 110.
But originally have been mentioned.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. So I think Nietzsche is asking an interesting question, where logic comes from. So imagine you are a parent to a child, which might not be such a big stretch for some of you. And what if you have a child that likes to ask all these why questions? Yeah? And the child is asking you, you know, where, I mean, all right, let's go back. So, what is the origin of logic? So, imagine if you have a child and it keeps asking you some questions, and one of these questions is where logic came from. So, what is the answer? Where logic came from? Now, okay, maybe we need a preliminary question to that. What is logic? What is logic? Do we all know what logic means?
Representation.
Sorry?
Representation.
Not exactly.
Rational way of thinking.
Rational way of thinking. That's good, Irene. Anyone else?
Sense.
Sense. Logic of sense. Sense. Is sense logic?
No.
What? No. Okay. Logic. So what is logic? Yes.
It's a system of coherence, but it only makes sense internally to its own structure.
Okay. What is logic in Spanish, for instance?
Lógica. Do you mean the meaning or the word?
The word.
Lógica.
Lógica. Yes. And what is in Portuguese?
Logic.
Okay. Anyone? What is in let's say Chinese? Logic. Logic. Read. So, logic. So is there is no? It's a Latin word converted to Chinese, or is it a? Yeah. Is it an accident?
Is an accident?
You think it's an accident? No. It's a. So is there a Chinese word to logic?
Is there a Chinese word for logic?
I know the Arabic word which is also used in Farsi is mantiq.
And what does it mean?
Reason.
So,
We should ask Terry because it's a Greek word.
Yeah.
sorry?
We should ask Terry because it's a Greek origin, isn't it?
Well, how do you say logic in Greek?
Logiki.
Doesn't it mean the word?
It's
And
speech.
Speech word,
Yeah, right.
okay, so I want you to see the definition in the Oxford Dictionary. That is. Could someone read the definition of the noun?
You need to be myopic.
Is that? Yes, thank you. So,
Reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity, experience is a better guide to this than deductive logic.
Yeah, these are examples. And what is the second one? Just go to the...
a particular system or codification of the principles of proof and inference. The systematic use of symbolic and mathematical techniques to determine the forms of valid deductive argument.
So I think what Nietzsche means is probably the first one, reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. Yeah? It means to only say those things that are valid. Yeah, and not to say things that are not valid. Yeah? It's only to say things that have meaning and not to say things that don't have meaning. Yes, Irene?
But valid to whom? Or in what kind of context? Because it could be valid for you.
But yeah, but why are you saying that? Because Nietzsche is already arguing with logic. So we don't need that at the moment. We're just trying now to understand what is the definition of logic. Because we are going to Nietzsche and see why he says that there is a problem. Yeah. So do you understand? Logic is saying or writing or expressing yourself only in a way that has validity. And only in a way that makes sense, and not in a way that doesn't make sense. Yeah. So it might become a little bit clearer as we go through this section. But the origin of the logical. What is the origin of logic in man's head? So we all seem to have the ability for logical reasoning or logical thinking. Yeah, and or so it seems. Nietzsche is saying in the second sentence, surely it arose out of the illogical, the realm of which must originally have been immense. So Nietzsche is saying something quite interesting, very, very simple as well. He says, before there is logic, before there is a way to say things that are valid, there has to be a big sea of things that are invalid. There has to be a big ocean of things that are illogical. Yeah? What is this ocean of things that are illogical? Another word for it is chaos.
Or nonsense.
Or nonsense, yes. Chaos is precisely, and that is what chaos means, chaos is precisely the absence of meaning. Surprised? Think about it. What is meaning? Is when bits stick together in a way that makes some kind of sense. In a situation of chaos, there is all the bits are randomly distributed. That is chaos. Chaos, for that reason, is absence of meaning. So you might say that how we, we're not sitting here to discuss logic. We're sitting here to figure out what does it mean to be an artist. Yeah. So what does it mean to be an artist in terms of these two sentences? Well, here is one way you can think about it. The world is not populated by logical entities. That came later. The world is populated just by stuff. This stuff has different shapes. Some of this stuff can be called, airs and stones and water, and some can be called computers and bottles and cardigans. I don't know. But it's just stuff. Yeah, that's what there is. Now, out of this stuff, sometimes, on a good day, under certain favorable conditions, you manage to take a few bits of this stuff and stick them together in a way that somehow works. How do you know it works? You don't exactly know, but you kind of feel it might work. Then you bring it on Monday and install it. That's what you do. Is it so? You play with some bits until few of them seem to somehow stick like bits of a puzzle, even though they are not bits from the same puzzle and they don't even have this handy, you know, things that fit together. But nevertheless, you say, well, actually, you put this and that and this on top like that, and it's kind of okay. And sometimes, in doing that, you show us how meaning happens. And in a successful install, the room is full of meaning. In a less successful install, there is less meaning. Yeah? So that's how you could think through this very simple statement that Nietzsche is putting forward here. What is the origin of logic in man's head? Or what is the origin of art in the artist's head? Instead of the origin of the logical, let's read it as the origin of art and see if it helps. It might not. It's a gamble, you know, but what is the risk here? The origin of art. What is the origin of art? Abbas, could you do this is the translation? Substitution. In this way?
I'll try.
Thank you.
So instead of logical, we'll call it art.
Yes, something like
that. The origin of art. What is the origin of art in man's head? Surely it arose out of the non-art.
Well, what is non-art? What is the word of non-art?
The mundane?
Good. Another word for what is non-art?
Cows.
Cows. Moo. This kind of cow? Yes. Yes. What else? Yeah, it's true, but what else? Come on, how do we call things that are not art? Anyone?
Representation.
Not everything. Many things are representation, but not everything. How do we call things that are not art? You know, the things you eat for breakfast, the things you brush your teeth with, I don't know, all these things. How do we call things that are not art? Is there a word for them?
Tools.
Huh?
Tools.
Tools, okay, tools are part of it. What else?
Life. Nature.
Nature, okay. Nature maybe is also part of it. Give me a better word.
Reality.
Reality, okay, but art is... Oh, reality is okay. Okay, maybe reality is one possibility, but maybe something else, yes?
Logical, no.
No, because we are saying, well, science is also part of it, but let's say, what is this?
Object.
It's an object, or it's a thing.
A thing.
Yeah, so the world is made of things. Now, even though not everyone agrees, but we leave it for later. The world is made of various things: notebooks, glasses, cups, tables, air we breathe. You know, all these things. Yeah, that's what Nietzsche says. Before there is art, there are things. Before there is the logical, there is the illogical. Yeah. So you see, what we try to do here is to show you that he is speaking here about you, about your practice. Yeah, and he's saying something very clear that you probably already know, but he puts it in words. Yes.
Ideas.
Maybe, fine. But let's just say that at the moment, let's just say that there is the world of things comes out of the world of things, the world of art happens. Is that wrong? Is that too much of a stretch?
No.
We can also say out of the real, the world of art emerges, but then the question will be what is the real? And then if we submit that, I have to go back to the things. Yeah? See what I mean? Okay, so let's say, let's start again. Hey, attention here. I told you it's going to be difficult.
Okay. So
the origin of art, yes. We're going with yes, things and art, yes.
The origin of art. What is the origin of art in man's head? Surely it arose out of things, the realm of which must originally have been immense. But innumerable beings drew inferences in a way different from that in which we do now perish. Nonetheless, they might have been closer to the truth.
Okay, that here became a little complicated. But it is possible to take these first two sentences and to see that the world of the art objects emerges out of the world of everyday objects. Yeah? How? by finding reasonable, logical, central connections between objects and sticking them together. Yeah? So because what did we say about the definition of logic? We said that it is validity. It is about the principle of validity. So as an artist, you also operate with the principle of validity, but your validity is not based on, let's say, mathematics. It might be based on the senses. And you might find a validity in combining an umbrella, a sewing machine, and a surgical table. Yeah, do you know this expression? The connection, the accidental encounter of an umbrella and a sewing machine on a surgical table. That is the description of surrealism by, is it Breton? I'm not sure who is Breton who said it. Yeah?
It was some smaller writer.
Sorry?
It was some unknown writer, I think.
But I don't remember who said it, but someone who had to explain surrealism in one sentence said, this is what surrealism is. The accidental meeting of an umbrella and a sewing machine on a surgical table. Yeah? So here is a world of things. Umbrellas, you take out the umbrella when you go out when it's raining. A sewing machine, take it out when you need to fix a jacket. Yeah? And a surgical table. So it's quite clear when we get to use that. But this is three things that, for whatever reason, in these conditions, in this environment, come together and make sense, like the Tesla that now flies into space. Yeah, the accidental meeting of a roadster Tesla and a spaceship, and maybe not so accidental, and David Bowie, and that's why we can say that it is a desiring machine. That's why we can say that it's an artwork. Why it is an artwork? Because these things stuck together in a way that makes sense. It kind of makes sense that David Bowie, Life on Mars, plays in a spaceship that goes to Mars. It makes sense, isn't it? No?
It does, but isn't it a bit obvious?
I didn't say it isn't obvious. Yes, of course. But this is not the point at the moment. The point is that these three things that, let's say, Musk puts together in the spaceship, his electric car, David Bowie, and, for instance, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that he puts together, appealing to a kind of nerdiness, geekiness in all of us, appealing to the kind of lonely teenager dreaming about, becoming famous, and listening to Life on Mars, in your bedroom, in the headphones, hating the rest of the world. Yeah, he's appealing to this. He's appealing to kind of the geeky person in us that reads this science fiction and understands the jokes that no one else in your class understands. And he's appealing to that, and it is somehow making sense. Yeah. Now, why it is making sense? Because some kind of desire holds these things together, right? That's the origin of art. That is also the origin of logic. Yeah. So again, I just want it to be quite clear what Nietzsche what through Nietzsche we can say about practice. It is this seeking meaningful connections between things. Some of these things can be your dreams, your thoughts, your memories, your fantasies. Some others can be objects you picked up. But it doesn't matter what kind of things. Things doesn't mean that they have weight, that they don't have to be solid. They can be abstract things, they can be fantasy things. Yeah? But that's basically what the process of making art is. It is very, very simple. As you see, again, it's not about ideas, it's about finding things that somehow stick, that have bits of Velcro on them, that can get attached, and then something happens. And sometimes you attach things, and it doesn't stick. That's not a big deal. It's just part of the way this process works. So, Now we are not talking about art anymore. We're going back to the origin of logic. Let's see what we get here. He, for instance, I'm reading now the yellow bit. He, for instance, who did not know how to find identity often enough, both with regard to nourishment and to hostile animals, that is, he who subsumed too slowly and was too cautious in subsumption, had a slighter probability of survival than he who in all cases of similarity immediately guessed that they were identical. Does it make sense? Do you understand it? Yes? Translate it to me to the language of photography. Explain it to me in relation to photography. Would you do it? He, for instance, he, the photographer, who did not know how to find the identity of it. What does it mean? What is identity? Who? Yes. What is identity? Now you can say this word. Thank you. You see? Identity is indeed representation. Do you understand why? Why? Okay, so why is identity representation? Can someone tell me?
Because something corresponds to something else.
Very good.
It's a coherence.
Yes, very good. Representation is identity because in representation something, an object or a person corresponds to a picture. Yeah? And why a picture and a person can correspond? Because they are on some level identical. But also then we can say that the picture represents. What do you think, Amy? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just.
You're concerned.
No, I'm thinking, like, but what about if, for instance, we have a person who's not really, I mean, the identity is something you build according to experiences you have in life.
Yes.
So, for instance, you're always surrounded with images that represent
yes.
the kind of identity that's been pushing onto us. So it's going to be really, it could be maybe dangerous to actually build that identity for yourself.
That's exactly what Nietzsche says. You're completely right. That's a perfect point. Yes. It is exactly about the danger of identity. Let's see how Nietzsche gets to that. He says, but before we can explore the danger of identity, he shows us why identity had this seductive power. So that is also quite interesting, I think. He says, he who did not know how to find identity often enough. What does it mean? What does it mean to find identity often enough? It means to, for instance, see something and say, oh, didn't I see you before? Don't I know you from somewhere? You know? From the other tribe. Are you a spy? You know? So to find identity is to recognize. So two people, yeah, two creatures. One is good at recognizing, I saw you before, oh, I know this plant, you know, it's poisonous. Or, you know, I saw this shape before, you know, it means that there is a tiger coming out of the bushes. There is one person. And the other, who is not so good at seeing things as identical, yeah, who is better at saying how actually the similarities between different things, you know, and how, so, look, isn't the stripes of the tiger are so somehow similar like to the waves in the river. Yeah? You could have that kind of photo. Yeah? And you could have one that says, oh, this is a tiger, I saw it before yesterday, ate my brother. So, who do you think has better chances to become an artist? No, it's not. So you see, the one who sees the stripes of the tiger as the waves in the river is definitely a better artist. But unfortunately, also a quicker dinner for the tiger. Yeah? The one who sees the tiger not as the waves in the river, but as something you need to run away from, survives. And that's why we end up in a world where logic is, and science seems to be much more important, get much more funding than art. That's one way to look. Yeah? So, but we are here now. There are no tigers. We can actually afford looking at a tiger and say, this is interesting, how he looks like waves. It's okay. Yeah? So then we might look at the cow and the spots on the cow and say, but don't they look a little bit like fractals? Isn't it fascinating how all cows are a little bit the same, but also quite different? We don't need to be bound anymore to the logic of survival that demanded us to be so good at identity. We can also allow ourselves now to develop new sensibilities. Yeah? So, he, for instance, who did not know how to find the tiger often enough, are you with me there? Yeah? He, for instance, who did not know how to find the tiger often enough, both with regard to nourishment and to hostile animals. Yeah? So he who didn't know how to identify edible plants and how to identify dangerous snakes often enough, that is, he who subsumed too slowly and was too cautious in subsumption had a slighter probability of survival than he who in all cases of similarity, in all cases immediately of similarity, immediately guessed that they were identical. Yeah? So survival depended on seeing identity between the tiger you saw yesterday and the tiger you see today and taking the necessary action. So it's because that was beneficial for our survival that we are insisting on thinking that there are identical things in the world. But what Nietzsche is saying, that is not necessarily really the case. It just was a useful trick. Right? So,
Damien Hirst did the same thing with the spots in the Tate. He got a group of identical twins to sit underneath these spot pictures, which were seemingly identical if you looked at them.
Yeah.
But if you looked at them closely, they obviously weren't identical. And if you look at identical twins closely, they're not identical.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we spoke about this example. We could look at identical twins and say, oh my God, how different they are. That is fascinating. They are different in so many levels. They don't have identical cell in their bodies. Yeah. So why are we so obsessed with identity? Why we are so privileging, for instance, forms of art that are working with resemblance? We so like to see things well painted, well executed. You know, we kind of cherish various forms of resemblance, family resemblance. You know, blood is thicker than water. And Nietzsche is saying these tendencies of ours to privilege identity, they are based on this survival instinct. But these days, they might cause us to assume a form of politics that is nationalistic or perhaps emphasizing closely knit communities and rejecting immigrants or foreigners or people who speak different languages or people who look different. Why? Because when you are different, you shatter identity. You are not identical. So it's a threat to this identical thinking. Yeah? So you see how we could arrive at quite far-reaching conclusions about politics, about many things, based on Nietzsche's observation that identity is something it's a quality we artificially acquire. Just as, do you know what is branching in small babies? Anyone? I hope there is someone here who can correct me, because maybe I'm just talking nonsense. But branching in small babies is that if you come in next to a really tiny baby, a few months old, and you get them to turn their head, they say, and they turn their head to one side, they instinctively raise the opposite arm to grab a branch. It's called branching. You can try doing it with children. You know, you tell them to turn their hand, and the hand rises up to grasp. Just as even the tiniest child knows how to, you can hang them from a branch, and they will hold. They just know how to do this. Every child, always. Why? Because those who didn't, didn't live to tell the tale.
But there's a reflex in the palm as well. Like if you touch this bit, it closes down. So
Okay, yeah, but I think that's why it is. That's why there is the reflex. Because if you didn't know how to hold the branch, you wouldn't be there. Okay? So what Nietzsche is saying is just as, and do you know it about that babies are really good at kind of holding, if you put them on there, I don't know.
I haven't done any experiments.
You should. So Nietzsche is saying our preference for identity and for logic is exactly like this. Or in the child, is exactly like this turning of the head. Is a response to the environment. You could imagine human beings in a different environment, perhaps following Elon Musk's fantasy of transgalactic human species. There will be, if we go to live on Mars, there will be no tigers. What survival will require of us on Mars? Maybe other qualities than seeking, let's say, identity. Perhaps something else. So give it a few million years in your imagination and ask what kind of consciousness will emerge out of these different conditions, that perhaps are not about identifying. Maybe it is about something else. We don't know, because we can only kind of speculate. But what Nietzsche tells us is that the way we are is the product of our environment. It's not like we are a sort of finished entities shaped in a particular way by God, who breathed this kind of divine spirit into us, and so we are like these fully formed human beings dropped onto the planet, like in your animations. Yeah, we are not like that. We are formed by the environment we are in to become who we are. Yeah, it's the environment that makes us use logic, use identity, give things names, give things labels, in a different environment, with different threats, with different demands. And for survival, we could be completely different. So that's kind of interesting, yeah? It suggests that there is no fixed self, there is no fixed you. What you consider you or I or me is created by the situations you are in. And as situations change, and you don't need to go to Mars for them to change, they change on a micro scale all the time. This session will end and you will find yourself, let's say, in the canteen, and there is another environment, another dynamic, and as a result, you are different as well. It's not the same you. And then you go home, for instance, and you are with your family or with your friends, and it's a different you. Or if you go, let's say, to the gym, then it's not like the gym is a different environment. You are different in this environment. Yeah? You are in the gym and in a seminar a different person. In days long gone, I used to go to the gym. I always found it completely fascinating. Because I used to go to the gym, I also used to spend a lot of time in the British Library because we were working on my research. And this kind of, it's just so fascinating how there is this clear sense that in the gym, it's just the body, and you can't really talk to anyone about anything else. And in the library, you have to leave the body completely at the door. You know? And there's no one thought to have sort of a library with treadmills or something, or I don't know. Reading rooms with the jumping ropes. Huh? So you see, the one who was not so quick at identifying had a slighter probability of survival than he who, in all cases of similarity, immediately guessed that they were identical. The predominant disposition, however, to treat the similar as identical, an illogical disposition, for there is nothing identical as such, is what first supplied all foundations of logic. Okay, so all of logic, and which means all of science, is based on a false premise, and that's including Elon Musk's spaceship. They are all based on a false premise. Do you dig that? Let's do it again. Could someone from the end of the room read to us this blue section again? Loud and clear. No? No takers? Anyone? Later, what do you do?
One sentence.
Is it too far? Is it too big, too small?
I have it here, so I found it.
Thank you.
The predominant disposition, however, to treat the similar as identical and illogical disposition, for there is nothing identical as such, is what first applied all the foundations for logic.
Okay, so can someone explain this to me? Is there anything here you don't understand? Is there anything here you do understand? Is there anything here at all? Yes?
I think if you break it up into small sections, you probably understand it.
Okay, can you do it?
No, I don't say all of them.
What, do you get something out of this? We're just focusing on the blue sentence.
The identity is the foundation of logic, so the identity exists as what defines what is identical and then logical as valid.
Okay. Let's go a bit closer. Or anyone else wants to try to tell us, what do you get out of this sentence? Does it make any kind of sense to you? I would love to hear from someone on this side.
Is it like the desire to categorize everything?
Yes, very good. The desire to categorize everything is?
The foundation of logic.
Very good. Very good. The desire to categorize everything is the foundation of logic. That's excellent. And the desire to categorize everything. So that's perfect, Hannah. That's so good because that suggests that the origin of logic is, drum roll, desire. The origin of logic is desire. Hannah said it, not me. But that seems to be what Nietzsche suggests, because the desire was first and foremost not to be eaten. It is a form of pleasure, not to be eaten, I guess, no? You get a lot of pleasure from not being beaten by a big animal. And that's why logic developed, to stop us from becoming someone's dinner. Right? So, and how are you doing there? There are a couple of people that can hardly see. Oh, hello. Okay, so the origin of logic is in desire. Let's see how it unravels here. The predominant disposition, what does it mean, the predominant disposition? The main tendency. Yeah, do you understand? The main tendency or the, you can even say the desire to treat the similar as identical. Yes,
but in some way it is saying that there is nothing logic.
No, that's not what it said. It's more about the origin. The predominant disposition or the desire to treat the similar as identical. Okay, so there are similar things in the world. Yeah? And Nietzsche is saying the desire to treat similar things as identical. So we have similar you know, we have a negative in the enlarger, for instance, or we have a file on the computer and we print 20 copies. And our disposition is to say they are identical. Nietzsche is saying they are not identical, they are merely similar. Your memories are not identical to what happened. They are at best similar. You know, your photographs from the holiday are not identical to the holiday. They at best have some resemblance. Yeah? So there is resemblance, but we restructure it as identical. This, Nietzsche says, is an illogical thing to do. It is illogical to say that 10 prints from the same negative are identical. They are obviously not. They are in different places. The identical twins, if they were really identical, they would be in the same place, wouldn't they? How can they be identical if they are not in the same place? Yeah? But if they are in the same place, then you only have one twin, and it's not even a twin anymore. Or maybe it is a twin that is so identical that it is in the same exact location. Now, it does happen that two things occupy the same place and we don't see it. You know, it very easily can happen that the people who walk through this building, usually wearing black t-shirts and black trousers, who clean the building, who bring in the supplies, that we live very with them, but we often don't see them. Yeah. So it is possible, but that takes me slightly away from what I wanted to say originally. That the desire to see things which are similar as identical is the foundation of logical thinking. And this desire, Nietzsche says, is itself irrational. Yes?
In that way, he's saying that the logic.
He says that logic is based on something irrational.
But the irrational means that it's illogic.
Logic is based on something illogical. Right, correct. Logic is based on something illogical.
So it's the sense of nonsense. And
logic is based on nonsense. Good.
Yeah. And logic can.
Sorry?
Is it only an illusion then?
It's a good question. It's a good question whether it is an illusion. It is an illusion. It is an illusion, yes. Logic is based on the illusion. You can say that as well. Very good. Excellent. Really, really, really good understanding. Logic is based on the illusion. And what is the illusion? The illusion is similar things are identical things. Now, take this notion of identity away from, let's say, traditional photography, you know, the photojournalistic photography, documentary photography, the architectural photography, and it collapses. The only reason, let's say, you're the architectural photographer, no? The only reason the architectural photograph operates the way it does is because there is an implied identity between it and the building, even though we know that it's not. We know that we can leave in the photograph. We can close the door and put the photograph. But there is a sense that on some level there is identity between the image and the building. Yeah, you agree with that?
But they are not the same.
They're not the same. And yet, for instance, I can give you, and they're of course not the same, and yet, somehow, we also look at the photograph to understand the building, or to feel the building.
Yeah, but I think our main goal is to have an exact representation as much as we can.
To have the exact representation.
Or as much as we can. But
yes, exactly, exactly.
Not going to be the exact with the same.
That's exactly right. But you know, no one looks at an architectural photograph as, let's say, an abstract shape that does not relate. The whole point of this image, at least part of its point, is that it relates to a physical entity that we can call a building. Yeah? Because otherwise, what is the meaning of architectural photography? Exactly, exactly, yeah. But the reason it works is because we understand that the image and the building are on some level identical. Yeah, exactly. And Nietzsche is saying this understanding is anchored in illusion, in a mirage, in a fantasy.
You also say that to believe in logic, there is a leap of faith.
To believe in logic, there is a leap of faith. Exactly. So you see what Nietzsche is saying here, and he is saying that the whole mechanism that makes us look at a photograph as a representation of something outside the photograph is based on an illusion.
But basically all photographs are
Well, the photograph, anyone here has a photograph? I know it, what a silly question.
I am. Just one.
Okay, now, great. This will do. This will do. So, to the extent that this is a photograph, we will going to get to this question at the moment because we have too much on our plate already. But this, of course, is, let's say, a shape, an object. We could imagine a situation in which we look at it as a shape without necessarily connecting it to a real event. But it would be very hard for us to do. When we look at it, we kind of don't even look at it. Yeah, okay, you can me over. Yeah. We kind of look through it directly into this. Yeah? We don't really see the photograph, we see the group sitting around the table having their seminar. Yeah? So it's almost like you might say, this is not a photograph, this is an anti-photograph. Because the photograph disappeared, the photograph got dissolved. Where is it? We don't know where it is because we are through it, we are here. Of course, it is quite an advanced way of thinking. And if you put a proposition like that to anyone on a normal photography course, and they will think you're crazy, maybe, yeah. But at the same time, I think they will listen because it touches upon something that every photographer kind of sometimes suspects in the moment of the dark night of the soul, that maybe it's really just an illusion, that the photograph says the truth about something. Maybe just because that's how we set things up. That's how we choose to believe. Is it possible to imagine a different world with different beings where a photograph achieved, in the same way means a completely different thing, because instead of looking through it into a real event, we look at it. It's almost like it's looking at a kind of Coke for what it is, which is just sugar and water.
So yeah? looking at an image which is purely as data.
Maybe it means looking at data. Maybe it means looking at the code that underpins it, which it will be a long string of words of letters and numbers.
Isn't it the same that you mentioned a couple of months ago, Celestial Saga, oil architecture?
Yes, it's
because that's a sort of documentary one.
Yeah.
So how he.
Yeah, I will try. One moment. Yeah, let's say this one. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So how he shows us.
Yes.
So this is not real, because for instance from another angle we could see something completely different.
That's one reason why this is not real. The other reason, but not that it's not real, but it's not telling us the whole secret. Not only that, no. It's more that there is part of the story that is not being told, that is being held back. There is what we are offered here appears as the real, but the real, the real that makes the real is not shown here. And the real that makes the real is the photographer with the camera, with the tripod, there in this environment, making this real, right? So what this real is not showing is the labor that makes the real real. And Salgado's dirty trick is that he says, I'm telling you the truth about workers. But he is not telling us the truth about his own work.
He tells his truth, right?
He tells, I don't know whose truth he is telling. I know that he is not telling us anything about how he worked to make this picture. So while it is allegedly about the worker, Salgado excludes himself from the work. It's like saying, trust me when I tell you everyone here is a liar. Yeah, believe me. You know, believe me when I'm telling you we are living in a dream world. Nothing is real. Listen, wait a second, listen to that. Believe me, nothing is real. It's all an illusion, apart from what I say. But everything else, everything is an illusion. Believe that. You know, never doubt that it's all a dream. But of course, I assume that you will never think that what I'm saying is a dream. You know, many people tell us, like Baudrillard says, we live in a simulacra world. Fine. But somehow Baudrillard seems that he is outside of the simulacra, telling us, not a simulacra, but something very true and real. I told you it's going to be difficult, so don't look at me like that.
But isn't Nietzsche's point that it's the ability to not see things too clearly that causes us to allow us to survive?
No, do you see that? Where do you see it?
Well, he's basically saying, you know, to kind of the skill of kind of, as Hannah said, like categorize things, see things as similar, is what allows us to survive.
He's saying that the disposition or the tendency to look for identity and similarity is itself illogical.
You see, I think that there's a kind of problem, I feel, in relation to this, where the people who have this kind of illogical basis of identifying and categorizing, they're doing these crazy things like going into space, and artists who are somehow sensitive to something real, or that we are kind of out of sync.
Well, artists who notice patterns and similarities between completely dissimilar things, between tigers and waves, between, let's say, boats that sail in the sea and boats that sail in the desert, they're not very well equipped for survival, because it will be a bad survival strategy to try to row your boats through the desert. It's not a logical thing to do. It's not a rational thing to do. But Nietzsche says it is a truer thing to do. Ironically, what Nietzsche is saying to Ili is that your rowing of the boat in the desert is more true than the rowing of the boat in the sea. Why? Because rowing of the boat in the sea is the logical thing to do, is the survival thing to do. It's driven by our biology. What Ili has done is driven by something else. What is the something else? We still need to uncover. But to give it a quick name is poetry. And for Nietzsche, poetry emerges as our basic response to realizing what kind of world we live in. Yeah. When we realize what kind of world we live in, a big abyss opens up. Because at that moment, at the moment when you remove your hand, you remember the hand mark in the cave? Are we on the same page? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you remove the hand from the cave, and there is this handprint left on the wall. I think at this moment what happens, I don't think we developed it well enough in the seminar. We just spoke about how this moment creates the sense of self. But I think this moment also creates the sense that you were there, you are there no more, and the mark is left to indicate that you are gone, you are absent. So you look at this handprint, it's almost like looking at your own death. Because you say, I used to be there, now I'm not there. Where I was, there is nothing. Where I was is the empty. So now, at this moment, you suddenly face your own disappearance, your own absence. You kind of, in a delicious way that we experience every time we watch film, or every time we engage with an artwork, it's about reconnecting with this sense. Here I am, and I'm also here no more. I think walking through the doors and making marks, for instance, that is a kind of, could be seen as a similar gesture of somehow facing this, your own absence. So when this moment happens, an abyss opens up in which you realize, for the first time, something that would say a cat or a dog or a giraffe don't realize, allegedly, a dog, not exactly, and it seems that dolphins actually are very clever. But we realize that we are going not to be here soon. That kind of, this realization is shocking and terrifying, because it kind of turns everything upside down. What one is to do now, when it is quite clear that we are on the way out, just as we speak. And at this moment, what might come out is a sort of scream, is a sort of groan. That's poetry. This groan is not logical, it's not rational. This groan is something that comes from inside, and it just aims to bridge this gap, to somehow perhaps reach back to this stage, to this point of innocence, when you were just one with nature, one with the world. There was no the other you that is now gone. And bridging this gap. So that's where Flusser comes in, that I spoke of, that I mentioned to you the other week. Flusser says, out of this sense of despair, when you are surrounded by nothing, when you are surrounded by abyss, out of this sense of despair, two responses are possible. One, he says, it is a prayer. A prayer goes out of your heart, for instance, out of your soul, and into the infinity, into the outside. And the other is art, or poetry. Poetry on some level, or art on some level, is like a prayer. Prayer is also an irrational statement. But while the prayer is going into the infinity, into the cosmos, it's just going as far away from you as possible in the hope of being heard by some alien creature, the art object, or the poetry, goes out and comes back to connect to the other human beings. So making art, for that reason, is always a social act, is always about bridging back to others, bridging back from your own personal abyss to the social, to the communal. That's a lot to take in, huh? And So, going back, the foundation of logic. So what is the foundation of logic?
Illogical.
Thank you. The foundation of logic is illogical. Now, this is something you can actually write down. The foundation of logic is illogical. I mean, you don't have to, but I think it's a nice way to summarize this bit. And that means that all science is at its very basis a myth. Now, here's one way to think about it. What does it mean to be human? So again, I'm just giving you how Flusser summarizes it, and he very much reads Nietzsche in this regard. He says to be human is to participate in a conversation. Again, it's like the can of Coke. It's not that we first come to this world as human beings and then we discover language. That's how I was taught. That, first, we have to say simple things to each other, pass with salt and stuff like that, and later we discover more complicated ways of expressing ourselves. But that's not how Nietzsche wants us to think about it. What we hear here and how Flusser elaborates is that it is out of dialogue, it is out of language and out of conversation that something like me is being created, something like me is being established. So, to be human is to have language. That's what being human means. To be human is to take part in a conversation. Okay? Anyone has a problem with that? Irene, you must have a problem with that.
No.
That's what it means to be human. If you are not taking part in a conversation, you know what was the Greek word for it? Okay. What is the Greek word for idiot?
No makes sense.
And what does it mean?
I don't know exactly.
Is when you are not communicating.
Can you check for next time what it means? I think it means, and my Greek is not good. I think it means, so I could be completely wrong. I think it means someone who is not taking part in any conversation.
You know, in Arabic, they use the word ajab as an idiot, and it means someone who can't talk.
Okay, interesting. Same idea. So to be an idiot is to be outside of a conversation. So if you are not in the conversation, you are not human. To be human is to be in language. There is no way to be human outside of language. Does it make sense? Hannah, you don't like it.
Can't you be
Wait a second.
Can't you just be mute and be human? So
Can you just be mute?
as in like
You can be mute, but it doesn't mean that you are not part of the conversation. Conversation doesn't have to be vocal.
is a conversation a communication?
Yes.
Language doesn't have to be spoken word. Language can be signs. Language can be hand signs. Language can be symbols.
It can be rhythm.
It can be rhythm. Well, yes.
Is conversation communication?
Yes.
So what about the animal? They have a code.
Yes.
The dog have a code.
And that's why our ways of distinguishing between humans, animals, and machines are all falling apart at the moment. We already now have talking dolphins that can count to 3 and say yes and no and call the name of the. While it is not what we call language, it is not much of a stretch. Well, it is much of a stretch, but it is possible to imagine that in the future, the head of the United Nations will have a dialogue with a dolphin about the sea pollution. It's
not what distinguishes us, the language.
That's why I'm saying these distinctions are falling apart. Precisely because we are not, humans are not the only ones who use language. But what I'm trying to say is that take language away from the human being and there is no human being.
Why humans are the only one who use
I didn't say that. I just said, take language away from the human being, and you took away the human being.
But I don't know, but...
What I'm trying to say is that to be human is ipso facto to be in language.
No.
No. Okay. I think this is important, and it's not like you have to agree to it.
No,
have to
but
memorize.
I'm thinking that if language is a communication, so a system of codes, no?
Not only, but language is also poetry.
Whatever, anyway, communication. Somehow,
And poetry.
for example, no, it doesn't need to be necessarily poetry.
But your problem is like dogs and animals also have this codes of communication, right? And then you said we are talking that to be human, you need to be communicative in some way. So,
but also the dog communicates with the other dog in another way. But
Yes, but dogs don't write poetry. They communicate, but they don't write poems.
Maybe that is not a wrong.
So wait a second, Irene. Wait a second. Maria, thank you. I think you point out to a problem with the way I describe this. Let's go back to this. When someone like, it's not exactly what Nietzsche is saying in this text, but it's helpful to go over this so the rest is becoming clear. When someone like Flusser or Nietzsche is saying, we are human in language, or when Heidegger is saying language is the house of being. Language for Heidegger and for Nietzsche is not communication, is how we are in this world. We are in this world in language. And language, of course, is for communication, but language is, of course, for art. And language is, of course, for prayer and for poetry. Now, dolphins communicate and can also speak to their trainers, but they don't write poems. They might one day, I don't know, but I don't want that to somehow confuse you. The point is that the reason, and the reason I want you to be clear about it is because I also want to show you why this way of thinking is limited. We will get to that. So I get your frustration, but let me lead you to it, and you will see that yes, there is a problem with thinking this way. But first let's understand it. What Nietzsche wants us to be very clear about is that before communication as a rational, as a logical way of exchanging information, before that, there is something irrational, like a scream, like a groan, like a sound, like a.
I think that.
Can someone make a sound? Can someone just make a sound? A groan? Can someone groan? Can please someone groan? Seriously, a groan. Yes, something like that. But
it's a cultural cry, isn't it?
Okay, can you do it?
Ah!
Good. Now what is that? Is that communication?
Yes.
What does it communicate? Distress. Well, it communicates that someone is here. It is like an event. Yes. Yeah. It says something, but it's also an expression of angst, of anxiety. Yeah? Is it a happy groan or a sad groan? You can tell, yeah? You can tell. Can you do it again?
It's painful.
Anyone else? Can someone groan? Come on, should be too much to ask you to groan, no? You have so much to groan about. What? Okay, let's move on. I think let's look at the next.
The animals are not considered as humans, but also they have communication.
Similarly, can you? Okay, can someone read from this? From similarly. Okay.
Similarly, in order for the concept of substance to originate, which is indispensable to logic, though nothing real corresponds to it in the strictest sense. It was necessary that for a long time changes in things not to be seen, not to be perceived. The beings who did not see things exactly had a head start over those who saw everything in a flux.
Great. Now, just so we are clear, who sees everything in a flux?
Artists.
Exactly. Now, let's go back and let's unpick it a little bit. So, what is substance? What is substance? What is the concept of substance? Give me an example of substance. Come on, quickly. Salt, did you say?
Yeah.
Good. Another substance.
Oil.
Oil. Another substance.
Sugar.
Water. Great. Yeah. Now, what is Nietzsche saying? What is interesting about the concept of substance? So first, you cannot have logic without the concept of substance, because in logic you manipulate substances. You say 2 of this is bigger than this, or something like that. Yeah, bigger, smaller. These are logical categories. Equal, not equal, right? So, but these categories operate on substances. Nietzsche is saying substances which are indispensable to logic, yeah, but nothing real corresponds to a substance. So there is no real equivalent in the world to a substance. Let's check that. So what some of the substances we mentioned?
Salt is
oil.
So,
Bone marrow.
Bone marrow. But you said oil earlier. Let's start with oil.
Nothing real corresponds to logic. Nothing real corresponds to substance.
Well, he says
to the logic, even though nothing real corresponds to logic. I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Because logic's an ideal.
In order for the concept of substance to originate, which is indispensable to logic, I read the comma after logic here. Though nothing real corresponds to it in the strictest sense. No, because you will see the whole sentence is about substances. But if you continue reading, it was necessary that for a long time changes in things not be seen, not be perceived. So he talks about substances. Things are substances. Yeah? Okay, so back to what we are trying to say here. He's saying, while we divided the world into substances, and Hannah, I think you spoke earlier about categorizing everything. Yeah? So that is the Aristotelian drive to give everything a label and a name and a category. Now every one of you has a name. Yeah? Every one of you is a separate substance, we can say, or a separate thing. And the room is full of separate things. But Nietzsche is saying, as a matter of fact, or really, it is an illusion to think like that, because none of these entities, none of these things are separate or autonomous. Yeah? As you know, your body is 75% water. And then there is the substance called water. So are you and the water substance completely different? Or are you the same substance? Right? So, of course, for some things, it's very helpful to think of yourself as a separate substance. But on a certain level of truth, you and the water are the same substance. Maybe you are just thinking water. Okay? Now, if you understand that about water, you should see it in everything else. So we say that this substance or this item or this thing is my laptop, right? But is it really an autonomous entity? Is it not connected to flows and processes of production, labor and finance and materials and exploitation and what not? Where this laptop actually stops? Does it stop where its bevel is, or does it continue, perhaps albeit in a less visible way, into other dimensions? Isn't it also connected to power that comes, God knows from where? Isn't the power that flows into my laptop as we speak is also a substance? So is it separate substance from the laptop? Well, not really, because without it, that is a dead piece of metal. Yeah. So where my laptop actually ends, Does it end in the power plant that produces the power? Well, not really, because the power plant is driven perhaps by electric turbines or by a nuclear reactor, and where that comes from. So where this thing actually ends, well, it doesn't end anywhere. The whole idea of this being a separate individual item that you can label is false. Do you see why it's false? Can you argue with that?
Is it the same that you mentioned about the Marlboro cover? He's
exactly the same.
To everything, even though it looks like a lonely.
Yeah, exactly. He might say that, you know, I did it all my way, but no, someone had to make your bloody hat and make your gun and train your horse and teach you how to ride. Yeah, so it's the whole notion of the substance, of the concept of substance is false. Now science is investigating separate substances. Science, Nietzsche is saying in his provocative and obnoxious manner, science is based on illusion. Now, which is not to say that it cannot do things that work. That it can do. No one doubts that. It also can do loads of things that are very damaging, as we also know, because it's somewhat interesting how science managed to both give us this wonderful life and significantly reduce our chances of enjoying it. And it's all done by the same science. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So perhaps Nietzsche has something. Perhaps he's onto something. Perhaps he says, well, maybe the reason science brings us to the brink of a catastrophe, nuclear, thermal, no, not thermal, nuclear or ecological, something like that, is precisely because it is based on false premises. It is based on an illusion, as we're soon going to find out. What do you think? Do you see why Nietzsche is interesting to listen to? And it's also not about reading a huge amount. It's about reading a little bit and just somehow making a connection with something. We read probably 5 sentences today. But if you read 5 sentences in 3 hours, it's amazing how far you can get. You can also spend 3 hours reading 200 pages. That also can work sometimes. You know, I'm not saying that this is the only way to read. But this is one way to read. This is also one way to work. And there is a hidden message to the seminars, which is not about reading texts and not even about understanding them. Is how if you do something regularly, every day or every week, in the same hour, for the same amount of time, whether you like it or not, things happen. You can do it with anything, saving money, save something, put something to one side every week. In a while, you will find yourself in a different place. You can do it with languages, you can do it with whatever you like. That is the secret. It's just about establishing a rhythm. The rhythm is not logical, it's just a rhythm. Every week, whether we like it or not, we are here and we spend 3 hours reading a few sentences. That's all it takes. There's absolutely no magic to it. But if you don't do it, you don't get it. Mm-hmm. Right. So, nothing real corresponds to substances in the strictest sense. It was necessary that for a long time changes in things not be seen, not be perceived. The beings who did not see things exactly had a head start over those who saw everything in a flux. So those people who ignored continuities and privileged separateness had the advantage. Yeah? And I'm slightly tempted to look at it from a feminist perspective. I don't know if you want to follow this line of argument, but let's give it a try. Maybe it's possible to say, I'm here following slightly a feminist philosopher, Lucie Irigaray. She is Belgian, French, she writes in French. She's a very, very good thinker, Lucie Irigaray. So just following slightly in her footsteps. Perhaps something like that could be said. Because women are mothers, because women are engaged in the process of giving birth, for women it is quite easy to think about continuities and flows and these states of flux. It could be that men have a different, men somehow find themselves wanting to establish their own identity, not via flux, via connection with other entities, but via individuality or identity or subjectivity. Now, when Lucie Irigaray attends to this question, she thinks about the Plato's cave as her as the image she explores. Now, you know Plato's cave, yeah? So she says, isn't it interesting? Let me just open Plato's cave for you. This is a crazy illustration from the 50s when you see all the prisoners are kind of ladies in bikinis chained. That is just astonishing. But that is from a school book on Plato from 1950s. Yeah. But let's take this one. That maybe is okay. So she is saying, all the interpretations so far are only concerned with the dark cave, where the shadows are the only reality, and the outside, where the bright light of day shows you things how they really are. And Lucie Irigaray says, no one wants to think about the passage between the two. What is happening here, in this gray area, in this flow, in this womb, in this neck of the womb that connects the inside from the outside? That might be the womb, that might be the world, you know, that, and according to this Platonic myth, to be born is just, or to become logical or rational, is just about suddenly arriving at sunlight. But looking at it more from a perspective of the female body, before you can get there, you need to go all the way through the neck of the womb. Yeah? And that's where, this is the twilight zone. This is the area where the cave is still there, but light is already filtering in, where life and reason and logic are actually forming. So logic is not being given to us by the sunlight, but by the mother that establishes the passage from the dark to the light. And it's the passage that is the essence of motherhood. Yeah? Now, and what Irigaray is pointing out is how the Platonic myth emphasizes the binary. In the cave, outside the cave. In the cave, outside the cave. You're either a blind, chained slave studying the shadows, stupid, or you are enlightened human being seeing everything in the light of day. According to the myth in the Platonic reading, what gave you the eyes to see? What gave you, where did you get this gift of seeing things clearly? Oh, it came from the sun. It's me and the sun. You know, it's like a kind of sun worshipping. Yeah? Why sun worshipping, she asks. She says, because what we don't want to acknowledge is that it's not the sun in the sky with its light that gives us the ability to see. It's the passage through the neck of the womb. Yeah? Because it's the passage from the light to the dark that is always being ignored by the binary story. So in Irigaray reading, instead of the binary light, cave and light, you have a, what do you say, trinary? And so three elements. Cave, penumbra, or this in-between state, the ghostly womb state that sometimes is also known as Kora. Anyone heard about the Kora? Yeah. Yes, of course you do. And because you wrote about it in your research paper.
Yes.
So tell us what Kora is.
The Kora is the pre-Oedipal state that we are in before, that as Freud and Lacan would recognize it. And Julia Kristeva recognizes it as a moment that a child has, where it's sensory and rhythmic and sexual, that would possibly, that then when the rhetoric from Freud and Lacan step in, they kind of wipe it out. But the new French feminists stand by it, and I think as women we need to stand by it.
So Kora, again, is this sort of in-between state, isn't it? Between, because Plato essentially is asking how an image happens. How you have, let's say, a thing, and then you make an image, but what makes the image, what causes the image to become an image? So he says there has to be this birthing process, the process of giving something birth. And it doesn't happen in the broad light of day. It happens in the dark. So the origin of the image is not something you will be able to see with the naked eye. The origin of the image is invisible, even though the image is the most visible thing there is. Even though the image is the visible thing par excellence, the origin of the image is not a visible thing. Even though reason and logic are bright and clear and sensible, the origin of the logic is not bright and not clear and not sensible, but murky and unclear. Yeah, the origin. One second, the origin of the logic, the origin of logic is not logical. You see, Nietzsche is coming back again, and we hear him now through Kristeva, through Irigaray, to some extent through Kristeva. But you see, Linda, how it is this Nietzschean notion that logic is not logical that gives succor to the feminist argument that you described. Yes, Irene?
I think a good example is the Cindy Sherman's selfie project. Have you seen
Selfie project on the Instagram?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. How? Shall we open it up? Yeah, tell us how.
It's because literally there you can see the process as well, but it's not, it's logic, but it's, how to explain?
Is the Kora like the process?
Yeah,
it's the actual happening and the becoming whilst you're making something.
Yes. So, Irene, is that what you have? Okay, so tell us what you think about it. Well, why did you bring up Cindy Sherman's Instagram?
Because it's...
I think I know. Yes. Why did you bring up this Instagram thing?
I don't know how to explain what I have in my mind, but I'm gonna try. It's like you literally can see the process that is there.
Good, good. Okay, excellent. So it's not the real person, and it's not the mask. It's the process of the one becoming the other.
But it still keeps the real person.
Good.
But it's now other person.
Good, good. Okay, so you are saying that the Instagram image or I like that actually, right? It's very good. So you are saying what we are seeing is not this and not this, but this.
Yes.
And maybe as an artist, that's where you really want to be. Neither in the womb, just, looking at the shadows, or in the darkroom, developing your negatives, No, neither you want to be outside here, in the scientific discourse, as let's say art and science, they probably go too far out of the cave. They are completely in broad daylight, trying to make art with science. Yeah, and then you have this area here, and you might say that's, as an artist, where you want to be, in a place where precisely the conditions that make logic possible become visible or emerge. Precisely at the place where you can put your finger on what causes something to become an image, or what causes something to make sense, what causes something to become logical. Yeah, and that happens somewhere here. And in this, yes, you have a question.
I'm just thinking about this from Plato,
Yeah.
Utopia.
Yes, it's from Plato Republic.
Kind of theory, something like that.
It's the story of the cave.
Yeah.
From.
It's just like a human just living in the kind like what we saw on the wall is just a shadow
Exactly right.
of the world.
Yes.
We don't know how actually the world outside
Yes.
is. So
That's right.
the question is, I'm a little confused about how that linked to the feeling that you just talked about.
How it links to feminism? Yes.
Yeah.
Can someone explain? Can someone answer this question? So, how the story of the cave links to feminism? Hannah? I thought you wanted to say something, so if you don't, okay.
Is it an assumption that women are in the cave and men are in the...
No, it's not exactly that. It's not exactly that. Right, let's try it again. Anyone else? Please? How the story of the cave. So, okay, let me try to explain what, and I'm using here the reading offered by Lucie Irigaray in her book Speculum of the Other Woman, but it doesn't matter at the moment. We might read it one day, but that's not the point. So, Lucie Irigaray, many people speak about this story of the cave. Yeah? But in every interpretation, she says, it's always about these two positions. It's very binary. If you are in the cave, then you only see the shadows. And the shadows are illusion. So you don't really know what's really going on. And if you are outside, you know what's really going on. You know the truth. So everyone's thinking about it like this. You either just see illusions, and what it means is always that if you are in the cave, if you just follow your feelings and sensations and instincts, but if you follow your logic and reason, and you see the world scientifically, then you are seeing it in a rational way in daylight. Everything is bright and clear. And Lucie Irigaray says this binary approach forgets that in order to get from inside the cave to the outside, you need to go through a tunnel, through like a path, like a pathway that leads you from the dark cave to the outside. And in this in-between territory, there will be some light coming from outside. There are still some shadows. You see things a little bit clearly, but there are still heavy shadows. It's not bright, but it's also not dark. And she says, this is the feminine. This is the feminine. The feminine, while the masculine occupies a binary position, either in the shadow or in the light, either it's a myth or it is science. The feminine position is that myth and science are not separate. They are constantly produce each other. So this is the place of maximum truth. When you are outside, you forget about when you are outside, you are not in the cave. When you are in the cave, you don't know anything about the outside. Here, you have both. You know, only in this passage, you know that the origin of logic is in darkness. The origin of science is in myth. And Irigaray says, this is the feminine. Now, whether you like it or not, it's up to you. I'm just telling you from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But I think it's very, very interesting, and this way of saying that the maximum amount of truth is not found in broad daylight, but and also, of course, it's not found in the dark of the cave, but in this middle ground, I think also says something about what does it mean to make an artwork, because there's always a kind of ambiguity about an artwork. On one level, you use everyday materials, balloons, iPhones, perspex, you know, things that are used in loads of other rational, logical, productive contexts. But you put them together in ways that often are illogical or nonsensical, not guided by reason, but by feeling. So you kind of taking us in with your projects to this very place. Yeah? And that perhaps is what you already know. This just gives us a way of framing our experience of making art in a slightly different way. Right, so that's a lot, huh? Are you tired? What are you saying, Emma?
No,
too much?
Super interesting.
Yeah, is it interesting?
Yes.
I'm honestly asking you.
Yeah.
Because we can go to other things. I think Nietzsche is worth doing because, you know, Nietzsche's, yes?
Is it something that Deleuze talks about de-stratification?
Completely right. Absolutely right. Spot on. Yes, well done. We will come to that. I think it's good to read Nietzsche because, you know, he'd been writing in 1850s. In this, and as we read it last week, as a lonely, ill guy in a little bedsit with no one to talk to, he was writing out this profound sense of not belonging and loneliness.
Was he writing the same time as Kafka?
No, he is about a generation, 2 generations before Kafka.
Right.
Kafka is the 20s and the 30s, I think. Right. So look, going back, so it was necessary that for a long time changes in things not be perceived. So our survival depends on seeing things as unchanging. It's not helpful for me to look at the laptop and see it as a flow of energies that come from different parts of the world and combine to create this thing. And it's not very helpful for me to now think about how this thing going to gradually disintegrate and morph into something else, into parts of metal and bits of or whatever. It's not helpful if I want to write an essay. It's not helpful for me to emphasize the interconnectedness between things if I want to give them clear labels and start identifying them and finding out things about them. So, no living being, Nietzsche says, no living being would be preserved had not the opposite disposition to affirm rather than to suspend judgment, to err and make things up rather than wait, to agree rather than to deny, to pass judgment rather than be judged, rather than be judged, be just, being brave to become extraordinarily strong. So, it's a slightly difficult sentence to read, but he says that, help me here, he says, no living being would be preserved. So there would be no one alive if we had the opposite tendencies from the ones we have now. No, we have this tendency to judge rather than suspend judgment. Yeah, to identify rather than say, well, I don't know, you know, or and so if we had different instincts in terms of dealing with identity, if we would be much more interested in how things are different from each other rather than how they are identical to each other, we would not be here today. Nietzsche said we would not survive. Yeah.
So that's quite clear, I think, because how do you know which things in the forest is okay to eat and which are poisonous? So we have
someone else is already eating.
We have huge amount of this. Can you imagine how many people had to die before we learned what mushrooms is okay to eat and what mushrooms are poisonous? You know, because how do we know it? Simply by trial and error. Yeah. But those people who were very bad at identifying this mushroom with the one someone ate yesterday, you know, and where is Johnny? He ate a mushroom yesterday. Which one? Well, if you don't remember which one, too bad. You know, because you're going to make the same mistake. But if you learn to identify, you say, ah, that looks like the one he ate yesterday. Let's go somewhere else. Let's catch a fish instead. Then you will survive. So the ability to identify is evolutionary essential. We didn't have that, we would probably be better artists, but not alive. Okay, I think we will finish here. Any questions? Steve? Why not? Irene?
No.
No. Any questions? Okay, yes, Hannah.
Do you think the context has changed now?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So are you saying to be an artist is to drive yourself?
To be an artist?
Is to like not be alive?
No, because we are now, our existence is not dependent anymore on these instincts, or at least not to that extent. So we now can afford, that's what Nietzsche says, we now can afford to look for truth rather than for logic. We're not anymore bound by survival that demands to privilege identity over everything else. We can be interested in difference. We can be interested in how things are different from each other rather than being similar. We can be interested in the similarity in patterns between tigers and zebras.
I think it's the interest in difference of difference.
The indifference of difference. Yeah. That's advanced. Okay, we will get there, but not yet. And okay, I will just tell you one little story, and I will leave you with that. But when I was studying for my undergraduate degree in many years ago, in one of the first lectures, a very distinguished professor was talking to us about mythology and science, and he was saying, well, first it was mythology, and then suddenly at some point the Greeks started to ask more scientific questions. And he gave us an example of this, a very first philosophers, Thales, Anaximandris, and Anaximenes. Do I pronounce the name correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah? And they were, we don't know much about them. We know that Thales said that everything is water. And Anaximandris said that everything is fire. And Anaximenes said that everything is movement. Yeah? And then he asked this distinguished professor, he said, how do we know actually that when Thales says everything is water, it's not a myth, but an attempt at making science? How do we know that it's not another myth, like that says that the world was born out of the head of Zeus, or like all the other mythological stories, or out of the egg of Leda, you know? How do we know that this is science? And the answer is very simple. The answer is that the reason it is science is because someone came right after Thales and said, you are wrong, it's not water, it's fire. And someone else came and said, you are wrong, it's not fire, it's nothing. And then, when it is mythology, there's no argument, it's just how it is. Yeah? So that is the basic distinction the professor was saying between the myth and science. The myth is irrational, and the science is rational. And then one very clever student raises their hand and asks, and professor, so we understand that the myth is irrational and science is rational. But what about distinction between myth and science? this distinction itself, is it rational or irrational? You know why you laugh? You laugh because you are philosophers. Only philosophers laugh at that. And it is very funny. You're right. Because if this distinction is rational, how could it appear before science? And if it is irrational, then how could science begin from something that is not scientific? So what is the answer? The answer is that the distinction between myth and science is just another myth.
It's your paradox.
Thank you. Now we can go.